Good evening, Californios. It's March 15th, 2022, and this is podcast number 7. And we are Red Star Report. This is Hal G. Lore with Voices for the California Nation. Tonight, we at Red Star Report present another segment to our podcast. Part 1 of an interview with Llyr Williams of the Welsh Independence Party, Plaid Cymru, about the history, the challenges facing the people of Wales and their efforts towards independence. Red Star Rebels, Red Star Report presents Independence International, a global discussion of evolving nations. And that starts now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Red Star Report's newest segment, Independence International, where we try to bring you a guest, an activist, a representative of an independence movement somewhere, hopefully in your neck of the woods, in this beautiful planet of ours. So from Hong Kong all the way to Europe, we're going to try to bring you people trying to reach out and seek that independence and have solidarity with other independent groups throughout the world. So today we have a special treat. Now you're going to hear about countries that we have. Maybe you haven't even heard about the country even, right? But aside from that, maybe you didn't even know there was an independence movement that was happening there. I'm sure everybody's heard about Hong Kong and Spain, but believe it or not, folks, it happens on every continent on this planet. Folks seeking just that yearning to be independent, having their own say in their futures, just like us Californians here. And today we got a special guest that was thankful enough to do an interview with us. I'm going to butcher his name. Hopefully not. Llyr from Wales. Llyr is a member and activist in Plaid Cymru. I'm not sure if that's right. It's the Party of Wales. He's the international officer in that group, Plaid Cymru. lFanc Youth. Man, you're gonna have to correct me. You're gonna have to correct me, Llyr, for all these if I'm getting these wrong. And he's also the General Secretary of the European Free Alliance Youth. And he's just an all-around knowledgeable guy on all things independence. Llyr, thank you so much for joining us here.
Good evening. Thank you so much for inviting me on. It's great to connect with different pro-independence and pro-autonomy movements from all around the world, across the pond, as we call you guys from here. So as you just said in the introduction, I'm a member of Plaid Cymru, which is the Welsh Pro-Independence Party. The name Plaid Cymru in English means the Party of Wales. I've been the international officer for the youth branch for the last 4-5 years now. So the youth group is called Plaid lFanc. And then for the last 2.5 years, I've been the Secretary General of the European Free Alliance Youth, the youth movement of one of the 11 European political parties of representation in the European Parliament, which represents national minorities, pro-independence movements. So I've been a bit busy with being involved with different groups over a couple of years.
I should also want to thank Angus Brownlee from the Scottish Independence Movement for introducing Llyr and Red Star and hooking this interview up. Thank you once again, my friend Angus. Of course, see independence happening everywhere, folks. Just to get everybody familiar with Wales, Llyr. Okay, first of all, where exactly is Wales in proportion to where London is or England? Where is that exactly? Is this a geographic yearning for independence? Is that part of it? I'm sure it might be.
It's so Wales is a country in its own right. It's one of the 4 constituent Nations, as they're called, of the United Kingdom. On the island of Great Britain, which is the main island in geographical size of the British Isles, Scotland covers the north of the island of Great Britain. England then a lot of the body of the island, and then there's a rather large peninsula to the west of England. So that's Wales, or in Welsh, the country is called Cymru. We're a country within our own right. And to get to our capital city, Cardiff, it's about 2 hours on the train from London. And from London to a lot of Wales is about 2-3 hours, depending on how well the rails and the railways and the roads are.
Okay. And it sounds, correct me if I'm wrong, all those, I'm just going to say tribes, or countries, I should say, different countries inside the United Kingdom, you all have you're unique to your own language, your own cultures, your own mores, folkways. Am I right in that?
Yeah, so you have the Celtic Nations, which are Scotland, Ireland, the Isle of Man, Wales, Cornwall, and then Brittany in France. There's quite a lot of Celtic history in the north of England, in the southwest of England, and in the West Midlands. And within the 4 constituent countries of the United Kingdom, as I said, Scotland has 2 distinctive languages, that is Gaelic and Scots. In Wales, we've got the Welsh language. In Cornwall, they have Cornish. In Ireland, then, obviously Ireland is partitioned into the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. The Republic of Ireland being independent, the north of Ireland hopefully will be independent soon. Well, will be reunified with the rest of Ireland where they belong. So yeah, and England is a very diverse country with a lot of diverse history. There's Celtic history there, there's Roman history, there's Saxon history. So on the unionist side, they like to call us a family of nations, but there's a lot of similarities as well as differences and distinctive histories and aspects to our countries as well.
So I'm going to ask this main question just because it's it may not seem important, but it really is. It gets someone's gut, especially from someone seeking independence. What's the general attitude about that England has towards the Welsh country and the Irish? What's the general attitude? Are you guys looked down upon by them? Do you feel like you're looked down upon by them? Do you feel like you're getting the second cup of tea or whatnot? I'm not sure how to make that analogy, but do you feel like short end of the stick?
This is quite a complicated question to answer, so I'll try and be as brief as possible. To answer this, you need to look at the United Kingdom as a family of nations, disregarding for now the British Empire, which is quite different with different history. So in the United Kingdom, you had the Irish, who are looked down upon, who suffered greatly within the United Kingdom through the 18th, 17th, 18th, 19th, going into the 20th century. And they kind of fought for their independence. Wales has had a mixed relationship with the United Kingdom. Obviously, Wales was linked with England, and that's why a lot of maps will call us England and Wales. And it goes back to the times of kings and queens, where Scotland had their own distinctive monarchy, which then later joined. Wales' monarchy died with Llywelyn ein Llyw Olaf, Prince Llywelyn, which was in the 1100s, I think. So we kind of joined with the English crown then after the death of Owain Glyndŵr, the original Prince of Wales, and with that history. And through modern history, Wales has a relationship with the United Kingdom. And I say the United Kingdom here and not England because we need to look at this question not as kind of fighting back against England, for example. There's a lot of solidarity between Welsh people and English people because we've shared a history for so long. It's wanting something different, wanting Wales to take its own course. We looked at the Industrial Revolution. The first £1 million cheque was signed in Cardiff. And that history was the history of natural exploitation and exploitation of workers, of land, of wealth. And it was extracted from Wales. So Wales has this natural wealth which has historically been extracted. And then there's been kind of turning points in Welsh history which have led to a real outcry. And I think one which led to the independence movement really gaining momentum was in the post-Second World War period in the 1960s, where through the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s and further along in history into the 20th century, the Welsh language really lost ground in a number of areas due to suppression, due to different specific issues. And there were very few 100% Welsh-speaking communities left. It kind of fell in numbers across the whole of Wales. And one community in particular was Capel Celyn. And in the 1960s, 1965, I believe the year was, there was a vote in the Parliament, the British Parliament at the time, to drown the entire valley to provide water for the city and wider area of Liverpool and the industry up there. And every Welsh MP bar one, if I remember the history correctly, voted against it, but this was overruled. And this 100% Welsh-speaking community, this kind of typical old Welsh, traditional Welsh settlement, this traditional culture, this traditional way of life was displaced. They were given quite a raw deal. The compensation payment wasn't what was promised. There was a lot of protests, but without the community's consent, without the Welsh nation's consent, this went ahead. And this was a turning point in Wales's journey as a nation, one towards supporting autonomy, rejecting this notion the resources were taken away, rejecting this unequal union. And it wasn't that England was the main beneficiary. There's a lot of communities in England who suffered from this wealth extraction as well. It's rather than pushing back against England, in my personal opinion anyway, others may have different views, but in my personal opinion, it's pushing it back against the British state as an institution, as a centralised power, which orchestrated the Welsh wealth extraction, orchestrated kind of suppression of Welsh traditions, the suppression of the Welsh language.
When did this happen with the water? How long ago?
In 1965.
Oh, wow. So I have to say, a lot of what you just said right now is eerily familiar with what's been happening here. It seems like it's a similar story that we all share as independent-minded speakers. I mean, that's just, I can't say it's a coincidence. It's obviously the common thread. So how many people are Welsh or in Wales right now how many people in Wales? Let's start with that. How many how many of those percentages are seeking for it? What do the numbers look like as far as
the population of Wales is currently around 3.1 million. Okay. So the population in Scotland's around 5 million, England then covers the rest of the population. Northern Ireland is about 1.5 million. So there's quite, it's quite a small nation with a small population, but
doable. It sounds doable. Those numbers I like. 40 million is a huge number here. You have no idea. 3 million. So of those 3 million, what's their general attitude? Are they like yourself, just wanting independence as well, or at least a break from
the independence movement has been gaining ground over many decades, since kind of turning points in the mid 20th century and long before that. The pro-autonomy movement in Wales has really been coming along. There was a referendum in 1979 on establishing a Welsh Parliament. Most of the Welsh political class at the time was against it, and the referendum failed. A different story to Scotland, who voted for establishing a parliament in that year, but weren't allowed one. And then it came to 1999, to the second referendum on a legislative assembly, it was back then, for Wales, and that passed quite narrowly. And then we had an assembly, and then Welsh devolution, which we call here, So where we had the Welsh Assembly, much like the Scottish Parliament, it has gone on a journey of increasing powers. And it started off as a legislative assembly, and then we had a First Minister, and then the Welsh Assembly government, which was for most of the 2000s, became the Welsh government. In 2011, there was a referendum on lawmaking powers for the Welsh Assembly, as it was known back then, where an overwhelming majority of people voted in favour of lawmaking powers. And in the last 11, 12 years of this 20-year journey of Welsh, some sort of home rule, we'll call it, there's been a growing sentiment amongst Welsh people that yes, Wales can think for itself. And
Good.
You'll find a majority in favour of autonomy, a majority in favour of devolution, a majority in favour of keeping the Welsh Parliament. The independence movement has seen significant gains in the last 5, 6, 7 years into the 30%. And beyond then, it's the job of the independence movement to convince the remaining population of the benefits, not just of the home rule that we have now, not just the benefits of the Welsh Parliament as we have it now, but also of independence as a concept and how that will work. So, yeah, that's kind of a brief overview of the last few decades of how support for nationhood, support for independence has happened in Wales, how it's kind of developed.
Let me ask you this. This is getting into what we say over here, inside baseball, or it's the politics behind what's happening. The Welsh Assembly, or the Welsh Parliament, Welsh Assembly, I believe is what you said. Now, how much influence do they have actually in, say, the United Kingdom is putting together some sort of referendum, and it's good for Wales, and the Welsh Assembly endorses it? Is that looked at by the rest of Wales as a positive thing, or does it even matter? Or do they even do that? Do they endorse certain legislation and condemn others? And does it have weight when what they say?
As time has gone by, so it's gone on this process, and through a load of different names in this process. Scotland are quite lucky. They started off as a parliament and they've remained a parliament. For us, it's a bit more complicated because we love complicating things in Wales. It's what we do best. So it started off as a legislative assembly, and then it was called the Welsh Assembly. Now it's called the Welsh Parliament, and we have the Welsh Government.
Got it.
So the way it works is that in post 2011 referendum on further devolution, specific policy areas are marked as reserved, and reserved means that they are kept under the control of the UK government. Things like defence, things like energy over a certain kilowattage per hour, specific foreign policy competencies. The Welsh Government has, over the years, gained power in health, in education. So Wales, much like different states in the United States, Wales was in charge of its own COVID-19 response, testing regime, COVID passes, though the whole testing and tracing of COVID contacts, that was done in Wales. So Wales ran a different system to England. Criticised by one side, praised by the other. So when there's been different policies kind of introduced on different sides of the border, there's been friction from some sides, welcome from the other. And usually the Welsh public are a majority in favour of what the Welsh Government has been doing in specific areas. There's been some controversial legislation. Wales was the first country to bring in the smoking ban indoors, a ban on people smoking indoors. Wales brought that in before Scotland and England. Wales brought in a charge for plastic bags, for grocery bags. I don't know what they're called in America, in supermarkets. So kind of legislation like that has attracted quite a lot of attention to the Welsh Parliament and the competencies of the Welsh Parliament. There was the minimum unit price on alcohol recently, which was following an example set by Scotland. So there's been a lot of different competencies
Good.
that the Welsh Parliament has done first, the Welsh Government has legislated upon first. Talking about referenda, the Welsh Government is run by the Labour Party, which is a British party. They're a pro-union party. When Scotland had their push for an independence referendum, the official position of the Welsh Government was against, obviously, because it was run by unionists, you know. On the Brexit referendum in 2016, the position of the Welsh Government, as was the UK government at the time, was in favour of staying in the European Union. But the Welsh people voted narrowly against that. The UK voted as a whole against that guidance, apart from Scotland and Northern Ireland, who voted in favour of staying. So that's kind of the sphere of influence of the Welsh Government. More recently, with a more hardline stance at Westminster level. Westminster is another name for the UK Parliament because it's held in Westminster Abbey. The Welsh Government has held symbolic votes on certain bills passed at a UK government level in order to show a firm rejection from the heart of Welsh democracy against them. And what we're seeing increasingly now is a UK government who are using Brexit, using this take back control to seek to legislate in areas which were devolved, as we call them. So I mentioned earlier the reserved powers. The other side, we have the devolved powers, devolved competencies. So we've had the UK government try to meddle in how the Welsh education services run, how the Welsh health services run. And this creates a democratic problem. The Welsh people have voted for the representation that they have at a Welsh level. They voted for the competencies which exist. They voted for the lawmaking powers. And we have a government led by a party which Wales has, almost in its history, never voted for, I don't believe, in the last 100 years anyway. A political party that the Welsh people haven't voted for in a majority in over 100 years. Trying to legislate on specific areas like infrastructure spending. Wales was a massive beneficiary of the European Regional Development Fund, which is what it was called. It built roads, it built leisure centres, it built railways, it built, massive infrastructure projects and undid a lot of the damage of the wealth extraction from Wales. Now we have this new Levelling Up programme, which is funding in a much more lower scale way to local councils, local areas, and bypassing the Welsh Government, bypassing the Welsh Parliament, which could kind of focus the money where it's needed most. But so yeah, this is kind of the back and forward we find ourselves in.
So I have one more inside baseball question here, and it's I just want to know the finance, the numbers here. What are we talking? As far as a GDP or your output, production, major exports, imports? What are we doing a year? Do you expect to survive? Do you expect to struggle a little bit? What's the economic numbers look like once you achieve independence? What does that look like? Or what does it look like currently, in fact, too?
So when discussing the Welsh economy, we have to look at ourselves as we're a deindustrializing nation. We had a large coalfield in the south, which suffered from massive deindustrialization. In the latter half of the 20th century, we had quite a lot of different industries and factories, which have since shut, as has happened in the central belt of Scotland, as has happened in the north of England, as has happened in different areas. Where Wales is rich is in natural resources, in water, in wind, in different minerals. And where Wales is also rich is our ability to harness those. So an independent Wales would need to rely on exporting electricity, exporting renewables. We already export far more electricity than we use and than we import, yet our energy prices are raising the same amount as other countries in the United Kingdom who don't produce this. And we have a massive reliance on agriculture. Agriculture is a massive part of the economy in a lot of Wales. And there's ways in which this can be, with the right policies, there's ways that this can be harnessed, that diversification can be used for good to diversify and grow the Welsh economy from there. It's difficult to get specific figures. A lot of figures are England and Wales only, but Wales could be a strong nation with a strong economy if it was allowed to export rather than give for free its natural resources, its water, its kilowattage of electricity, its natural resources. And also there's a great mind for business in Wales. You know, the first £1 million cheque was signed in Cardiff, the capital city of Wales, in a building called the Coal Exchange. And there's this kind of entrepreneurial spirit which has always existed here, and that needs to be harnessed and it needs to be supported. And what we're suffering from at the moment is an economy focused massively on inward investment, on paying companies subsidies to come here to run a factory here for X amount of years, and then once the subsidy runs out, the company goes away. There's job losses, there's issues there. And we need to use new technologies. We need to use the workforce and the power that we have here to diversify, to change our economy for the better. So I'll try and follow up with figures on GDP, but you know, with countries like ours, sometimes it's difficult to predict the economy, predict how the economy will be. But we need the powers initially to address the issues from deindustrialization, the brain drain from rural areas, and with that we can build a stronger country and a stronger economy.
That's I can understand that. Hal, I don't want to take up too much more time. I'm sure you have some pertinent questions for Llyr here. Do you want to go for it?
Well, I was actually going to ask him. I don't know if they're pertinent questions, but they might be impertinent questions. I was going to ask, it's like, is it the English or only the English that actually call it Wexit?
That's awesome.
No, I've seen that. I've seen that in a couple of English papers. It's like I can see where that would be attractive to them, but
it's not the term that I would use. I've seen it written down. Everything has got to be some sort of English word in exit, and I've been training to be a translator for the last year, and trying to translate that between languages is, I've seen it called Wexit or Wexit or whatever you want to call it in some papers, but if there was a pro-independence campaign on the day of a referendum, I don't think that that's the word that they would be advocating for.
I hope not.
No. It's in some ways it's a valid question, although I don't know if that's true or not. From what I've seen, the highest percentage of supporters for Welsh independence is basically in the youth of Wales. The under 24 crowd in somewhere in the 80 percentile range of people who support, and in those under the age of 50, somewhere in the mid or low mid 70s. So does that reflect the general political leanings of Wales going into the future, or is that always just been the case?
I think that they do call the youth in Wales the independence generation, because I didn't know it was under 24 that was that high. I'm 28 now, so I'm beginning to feel a bit old. But support for independence has been very high amongst young people, because I believe that those in kind of that age range, 18 to 24, never knew what Wales was like before devolution, before setting the Welsh. We've had the Welsh Parliament for 21, 22 years And they've grown up with specific Welsh schemes, a specific Welsh brand, the Welsh government, the Welsh Education Service, a specific education curriculum. They've been using the Welsh Health Service. They've been, so, and they see this kind of hopeful new future where generations before then lived through some really challenging periods in Welsh history. And I spoke earlier about deindustrialization. For a lot of communities in the south, they were ripped apart by the coal mine shutting, the factories shutting, by the mass unemployment that followed. So when you're faced with those crises, when you're faced with those issues, it must be quite difficult to see, well, how on earth could we make it ourselves if we lived through that? And it's the young people that are really carrying the hope. And it's not just young people, there's independence support across every age bracket, from my friends' children who are kind of 14, 15 to my nan who's 91 and beyond. There's support for independence across the board, and people of all ages who've contributed massively to the cause. But amongst young people, there's this growing feeling that the UK government doesn't speak for them. This came out after the Brexit referendum, where young people voted overwhelmingly in favour of remaining in the European Union. And it was very much those in higher age brackets that swayed the vote the other way. There were young people that voted for Brexit, but overwhelming majority. But they weren't franchised enough to get out and vote. They were kind of ignored in this system. There's very few members of Parliament in Westminster who are under 30, and young people in the UK at the moment face particular challenges when it comes to securing good quality, well-paid jobs. Often as time has gone on, as jobs have been passed down through the generations, employment contracts have got worse and worse and worse and more exploitative. And incomes have stagnated massively, and with this cost of living crisis, which is looming in Europe at the moment, young people more and more are looking for fresher ideas, for hope to change this system that they're living under, to build, I believe as a relatively young person that, for me, an independent Welsh state won't replicate everything that the UK does. It won't be bringing a UK state, putting a Welsh flag on it and creating a state of our own. It needs to address, first and foremost, inequality. It needs to provide opportunities. It needs to harness the powers, the resources, and the wealth that's in this country for the benefit of its citizens. And young people really resonate with that message, because if you've lived through the last 20, 25 years, if you're in your late 20s, your 30s, when you were coming to the end of high school, you had the 2008 global financial crash. And then you had a slow recovery, and you had massive austerity policies, huge cuts in public funding, services being taken away. You were going to university with tuition fees here, very different to the system in the United States, with a lot more expensive over there than here. But here, there were a huge shock to people who went from paying £3,000 to £9,000. And then you saw the communities around you, libraries shutting, services being taken away. Then you saw a little recovery, and then you've seen the effect that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on jobs, has had on people's education, has had on how society functions. So that will radicalize you. That will make you stand up and shout and say, I want something different. I want a better future. I want more hope. And that's why I think the young people are the independence generation, especially with Plaid Ifanc, the youth movement within Plaid Cymru. We see this massive enthusiasm for kind of building a new, more equal Welsh state, building, Welsh institutions for the benefit of people. And we're seeing that kind of momentum lobbying the Welsh government, who are a different political party to ours, to bring in policies which help young people, which give young people hope. And that's what we're seeing now, this influence.
That was Independence International. Part 2 of our interview with Llyr Williams will air next Tuesday, March 21st, here on Red Star Report. For more information on Welsh independence, go to www.partyofwales. That's www.partyofwales. For our final segment tonight, we have a brief activism in action with Shankar CIM. Take it away, Shankar.
Thank you, Hal. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Activism in Action. Tonight, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. Now, you see me come out here and talk about the different activists and protests and rallies that are happening in California, and how those are adhere to California values that we hold dear in the state, and we're trying to preserve it. But this time, I want to hear from you. Why do you want an independent California? What is the issues that make it that you think are so important that you'd be better off in an independent California? Is it economics? Is it your personal economics? Do you think your pocketbook could be less stressed out if California was independent? Maybe, I don't know, maybe you owe money on a student loan or healthcare. Or is it macroeconomics? Do you think, this state pays almost $100 billion average every single year to the federal government? Do you think it could be better spent if we reinvested it back in California on our own without having them telling us how to spend our own money, right? Is it healthcare, like I said before? I mean, the nurses union here in California have been trying to push universal healthcare year after year after year, and they've been shot down. Do you think their chances are better in an independent California? Is it the U.S. endless wars? I mean, you knew when Biden took us out of Afghanistan that he was getting ready to go to another war, and sure enough, here we are in the Ukraine, and definitely we're going in there. Do you want to see your sons and daughters holding an AR-15 marching off to another country that probably they can't even heard of or probably can't even pronounce to go to war? I have personal stories about war too. I mean, I've lost dear friends to war, and so is that why you want an independent California? I mean, the list is endless here. I have a list right here. In fact, how about our world perception, right? I mean, you go anywhere in the world, you tell them that you're an American, and you instantly get scoffed at, frowned upon. It's no bueno, right? But you tell them that you're a Californian, and it's an instant change, right? There's a smile on their face. They're asking you if you've been to Disneyland, if you know any movie stars, right? The mood and everybody's characters is so much more better when you tell them you're from California. Is it because when you travel outside California to the U.S., how you get treated? I've had friends that went to dinner and had the table next to them get up and leave because they knew they were a Californian. In fact, my other buddy just got back from Florida. He went to an NFL game out there, and the minute he said that he was from California, that he was scoffed at, and Newsom was ragged on for some reason. They all hate Newsom so much. We don't even know who the governor is. Well, we know who the governor is in Florida, but we don't know who the governor is for most of these states, but they know who our guy is, right? What is the reason why you want an independent California? Comment down there, make a comment, say, hey, I want an independent California because of boom. If there's only one comment on there, if there's only one commenter, dude, you are our new favorite guy. We are going to hit you up, man. So just leave a comment, quick one right there. Why do you believe in an independent California? What would you like to see in an independent California? And good. I mean, I hope this brings sheds us more light on what you want to see, what you want to are hoping to accomplish in independent California. But that's all I got. Hal, spread the message about this commenting, and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you, Hal. You have a great night.
Thank you, Shankar. That's Red Star Report for the week of 3/15/2022. Please check out our website at www.redstarreport.com. Subscribe to our Red Star Report YouTube channel. Go to our Red Star Report Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram. Give us a like. Give us a follow. We could use it. Because if you want a real California Independence Movement media group, it's all about the algorithms. Our thanks to you and all our Red Star Rebels for watching. As always, we are Red Star Report.